Looking for real stories that lift you up and light a fire inside? Welcome to Inspire and Impact, the podcast where purpose meets perseverance. This is where transformation begins and your story continues.
Welcome to the Inspire and Impact podcast show. I'm your host, Dan Rizestein. Today I have the honor of interviewing Ken Kunken. Ken, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Dan.
Can you share a little bit about yourself with the audience, like who you are and like what is it you do?
Dan, last week I turned 75 years old.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But just about 55 years ago, when I was 20, I broke my neck and damaged my spinal cord, making a tackle on a kickoff while I was playing on the lightweight football team for Cornell University. And as a result, I'm almost totally paralyzed. I have a little bit of movement in my left arm, but nothing on the right side of me. And as a result, I've been quite a bit dependent on those around me for close to 55 years now.
Wow, that's an amazing story. I mean, thank you for being so brave and coming on the show and sharing that with us. I mean, I'm so sorry that happened to you. It's obviously like a big life event. Can I ask you, when that happened, what do you remember that like happened at that time when you got injured? Was it because of a car accident or a sports injury?
I got injured playing football. I was in on the kickoff, and it was a game against Columbia University. And when I tackled the ball carrier, I broke my neck and severely damaged my spinal cord. And in an instant, I lost virtually all movement, as well as most of the sensation throughout my body. I only have sensation now, a couple of inches below my shoulders and up. I don't feel anything below that. So I've been paralyzed now for just about 55 years.
Wow, and here you are today. I mean, I think that's amazing that you're on our show today. I mean, I can't thank you so much for coming on the show. I mean, when you had that accident, what was going through your mind, like when you were in the hospital and rehab?
I really didn't know what was happening. I knew that I had broken my neck, but I didn't know much about spinal cord injuries. And I constantly asked the doctors, the nurses, the therapists to tell me more about my condition. But for some reason, a lot of them were reluctant to share that information with me. So I didn't know much about what a spinal cord injury entailed. And I spent the next 9 months and 20 days in various hospitals and rehabilitation centers. And while I was in the rehab facility, I was able to look at a pamphlet that the Rusk Institute in New York City had published, and with somebody turning the pages for me, it told a lot about a spinal cord injury, what type of movement you may have, where your level of sensation would be, how it would affect your bodily functions. But there was also a page on what type of careers you could eventually pursue. And the only career I saw for someone in my condition, I'm hurt between the fourth and fifth cervical in the neck, which is very high up. The only career I saw they had listed was to sell magazine subscriptions over the telephone. And I was devastated. At the time of my injury, I was a junior studying industrial engineering at Cornell University, one of the top engineering colleges in the country. And now it seemed the best I could look forward to would be selling magazine subscriptions over the telephone.
But yet, as you say that, something happened, like with a year or two later after that, you were able to somehow return back to Cornell University to continue studies. Can you explain how did that happen? Like, how did you, and it sounds like it was like a miracle you were able to go back to school.
Yeah, of course, my family was beside me the whole time, and they really encouraged me to make the most of my mental abilities, my intellectual abilities. So they encouraged me to go back to school. And fortunately, there was a vocational counselor at the Rusk Institute by the name of Joyce Mesh, who encouraged me to go back to school as well. I decided that the school I really wanted to go back to was where I had been studying when I was injured, Cornell University. So just 11 days after after I was discharged from the hospital, 11 days after I was discharged from the hospital, which was basically 10 months after my injury, I traveled 250 miles away from my home and family. And with the aid of a personal care attendant that I had met only once before, I returned to the Cornell campus in upstate Ithaca, New York, and I resumed my studies in industrial engineering.
Wow, that's really amazing. I mean, so when you went back to Cornell, but now you came back as a different person, what barriers did you face, like going to school as somebody who had this shortcoming?
First, you have to realize this was about 20 years before the Americans with Disabilities Act took effect, that mandated that educational institutions need to be made more accessible. When I went back to Cornell, it was one of the most inaccessible schools you could have found. Cornell's on a very hilly terrain in upstate Ithaca, New York, and virtually every one of its buildings had steps in front of it. One class that I took 3 times a week was located in a building that had 16 steps in front of it. And my dorm room had 10 steps just to get into the building. So on my first day of classes, I had to be either pulled up or bounced down close to 100 steps. And there were no curb cuts on the campus as well. So it was extremely difficult getting around wherever I needed to go. So just getting the class was difficult. Mastering the coursework was extremely difficult as well.
I mean, how did you pivot? Like you said, originally you went into engineering, then you eventually went into law. What made you decide to pivot to go into law?
When I was injured, this was well before the age of laptop computers. And engineering really didn't seem like a viable field for me. It was really difficult for me to function as an engineer. I never worked as an engineer. I graduated with a degree in engineering. In fact, I'm the first quadriplegic to ever graduate from Cornell University. But while I was at Cornell, one of my advisors, one of my professors in an elective I was taking in psychology, suggested that I pursue a career in psychology and become a counselor. So with his advice, I decided to follow that. And I returned to Cornell and earned a Master of Arts degree where I majored in counseling and student personnel administration. And I became the first quadriplegic to ever earn a graduate degree from Cornell as well. Excuse me. And then they increased my counseling credentials. I went to Columbia University, where I earned a second master's degree. This one, a Master of Education degree, where I majored in psychological counseling and rehabilitation. And I decided to work as a vocational rehabilitation counselor, helping to counsel other individuals with disabilities. But unfortunately, this was in the mid-1970s, and no one would hire me. Here I had 3 prestigious Ivy League degrees, 2 master's degrees, and for a year, I spent looking for employment before I could convince one organization to give me the chance to show what I could do. And that organization was Abilities Incorporated, which was part of what was then called the Human Resources Center. It's now called the Viscardi Center, and they're located on Long Island in New York State. And I worked for them as a vocational rehabilitation counselor. And I loved that job. I really enjoyed the work that I was doing. And for the first time since my injury, it gave me the opportunity to help others. Here I was counseling other individuals with severe disabilities. And that increased my self-esteem, my feelings of self-worth, my self-confidence, and it just really changed my life. And as it turned out, with all the people that I was counseling, I was the most severely limited. I had the least movement of anybody that I was counseling. And I enjoyed that work immensely. And my duties there kept expanding and increasing. And one of my responsibilities was to speak at conferences and at events before groups and organizations concerning affirmative action and non-discrimination relative to people with disabilities. And often after my talks, I would be asked questions. And while I would certainly do my best to respond appropriately, I was always careful to caution the questioners they should really speak with a lawyer about their concerns. And I guess it didn't take long, Dan, before I started to think, there's no reason why I couldn't become that lawyer. So I left my job and I went to Hofstra University School of Law and spent the next 3 years there. And when I graduated, I was fortunate that I had done an internship there at the district attorney's office, and I liked it so much that I applied for a job as a Nassau County assistant district attorney. And fortunately, the district attorney was a very progressive, forward-thinking individual who based his hiring decisions on my abilities rather than my disability, and he hired me to work as a Nassau County assistant district attorney.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, that especially like during those times where they didn't have, laws to protect people with disabilities, the fact that you're able to overcome all of that in those, times where people were less aware, or less caring. I'm not sure what the best words to use, or, didn't have the awareness that we have today. I saw, on your profile that you testified before a U.S. Senate subcommittee while you were still in recovery. Can you share the story behind that? Why didn't you have to testify?
I was still a patient in the rehab facility at the time. I had been injured 5.5 months, and Senator Edward Kennedy was going around the country conducting Senate Health Subcommittee hearings concerning how health insurance did not really provide adequate coverage for so many people in the country. And there'd been a lot of newspaper articles about me and the enormous expenses I was facing. And it mentioned that my father was actually an insurance agent. He was a life insurance agent. And he said there was no policy out there at that time that would sufficiently cover an injury such as mine. So that came to the attention of Senator Edward Kennedy, and he asked if both my father and I would testify before his Senate Health Subcommittee. And following my testimony, 8 days after my testimony, Senator Kennedy sent me a very nice note in the mail, along with a paperweight that had an inscription on it that the senator said his late brother Robert Kennedy liked very much. And the words on that inscription have always been very meaningful to me, Dan. The inscription read, "Some men see things as they are and say why. I dream of things that never were and say why not." And that meant so much to me that I actually later wrote a book about my life. It's on the shelf right behind me, and I titled it, "I Dream of Things That Never Were, the Ken Kunken Story."
Wow, that's so amazing. I mean, it's a very touching story. I mean, do you know that after you testified, did that help, with anything in Congress that you're aware of?
I believe it did. My testimony, gathered a lot of publicity. The senator said it was one of the best testimonies that he received in support of his bill. And in fact, after my testimony, I even received a letter from President Nixon at the time, congratulating me on what I was doing and my testimony. So I later again heard from Senator Kennedy, who said that my testimony did make a difference in the healthcare legislation. And I've been very proud of that.
So what inspired you to become like a trial attorney and pursue justice from a legal standpoint?
Two different things I might add. One, I have an older brother named Steve, who's 2 years older than me. And at the time, he was working as a trial attorney, as a public defender in Nassau County. And he suggested while I was in law school, I do an internship with the district attorney's office. I did that after my second year of law school, and I enjoyed the experience so much. And I found a new way that now I could help people and serve the community as a whole as a prosecutor. Now, at the time, I didn't know of any other assistant district attorneys on Long Island who were quadriplegics and who were trial attorneys. In fact, I didn't know of anyone who was a quadriplegic and a trial attorney. There may have been others out there, but I didn't know about them. But when I did my internship, I really enjoyed the work and I decided to pursue it. And I was very fortunate that Dennis Dillon, the district attorney at the time, hired me.
Can you maybe share any memorable cases that you worked on that you thought, were special or memorable?
There are a number of them. I've worked on a number of arson cases. I've worked on attempted murders, assaults in the first degree, robberies, burglaries, drug crimes. So I worked on a whole conglomeration of different types of crimes and trials. And for most of it, I had to pretty much rely on my memory to know what I was going to say for opening statements or summations, or how I was going to do a direct examination or a cross-examination of a witness. But let me tell you, one of the things that stood out to me is here I was, Dan. I went through 3 years of law school. I passed the difficult New York State bar exam the first time that I took it. And I was so proud to go to court my first day, only to find I couldn't fit through the swinging doorways in the courtroom. They were too narrow to allow me to get through in my electric wheelchair to get to the prosecutor's table. So it took a while before even the courthouse and the courtrooms were made more accessible for me.
Wow, that's so amazing. How did you build trust and credibility in the courtroom as somebody who has a visible disability? Especially back in those times, people are
Yeah.
"Oh, not me."
It was challenging. I think when the prospective jurors saw me or the witnesses, they were all taken aback to see that the prosecutor was actually in a wheelchair and couldn't even move his arms. So it really surprised a lot of people. And I need court officers to help me, with paperwork when I needed to hand a paper up, to show a witness. In fact, even one of my initial supervisors was taken aback when he saw I was hired, because as one of the supervisors put it, he can't even write. So he was surprised I was hired. But they quickly saw that I had a good memory and a good mind, that I was able to speak without a problem, and that I was able to handle myself as well, if not better, than most of the other ADAs I was working with. In fact, throughout the years, the number of trials, pretrial hearings, and grand jury presentations I did each year in the County Court Trial Bureau were consistently among the highest in my bureau.
That's amazing. Have you always had a very good memory?
I actually always did, but I worked hard to improve it after my injury to make it even better.
Can you share maybe any advice about how to improve your memory? Because you obviously know that.
Part of it is obviously concentrating and thinking about what you want to remember, and, what people say that's worth remembering. But I know that I once got a hold of a group of memory tapes put out by a memory expert by the name of Harry Lorayne, and I listened to them for hours. And I read a book called The Memory Book by a former basketball player named Jerry Lucas, who used to play for the Knicks. And they gave suggestions as well. And through those tapes and that book, and just working a hard day to try and concentrate and improve my memory, it's gotten quite a bit better.
That's really amazing. Actually, I think I have that book you're talking about by Harry Lorayne, because I was also interested in having a better memory myself. So I think I have that book on my bookshelf. I haven't read it yet. Aside from the one behind me, there's several on the bookshelves where I have a few hundred books, and I read most of them, but not all of them. So there's still a bunch that's on my to-do list that I haven't gotten to yet. But I was always interested in how to build your memory. That's why I asked you.
I always used to lie awake the night before I was due to give a summation and spend hours just lying there thinking about what it was I wanted to say and the order that I wanted to say in it. And by concentrating, I think my engineering background gave me a very logical way to approach things. And with that logical background that I learned in engineering, I tried to approach law the same way and very logically approach how I was going to organize my thoughts and deliver a summation. And I believe that helped a lot.
So what does it mean to you to receive an award from the Nassau County District Attorney's Office?
I was very honored that 2 years ago, the current district attorney by the name of Ann Donnelly established an award to be given annually that she named for me, the Kenneth J. Kunken Award. And it's given to the outstanding assistant district attorney each year who basically demonstrates the respect that I had for my colleagues, the loyalty to the office, the devotion to the criminal justice system, and the hard work that they saw that I was putting in. And it's the only annual award they give out annually, and that was made in my honor. In addition, while I worked over the years as an assistant district attorney, the court officers of Nassau County gave me an award as the outstanding assistant district attorney of the year. And I believe they did that because of the effect I was having on other individuals in the court system. So I might add, Dad, that I think between the award the court officers gave me and the award the district attorney's office established, they wanted to recognize that somebody with a disability can make an enormous impact on a job just by coming in contact with so many different people. These days you hear a lot of negative talk from the current administration concerning DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think in many ways they're missing the point that DEI doesn't just affect one individual person. It affects everybody that's exposed to that person. And by having somebody that may be some ways different than others and to be more inclusive, it helps everybody that's exposed to that. I know the court officers observe that, the district attorneys observe that, and I've received other awards over the years that seem to have highlighted that effect. That, in fact, when I was leaving the district attorney's office, what they do is they go through an exit interview where they ask the ADAs who's ever leaving, what was the best part of your job? What part of your job you thought could be improved? And I was told over the years, many of them said, best part of their job was meeting, working with, and getting to know me. And the reason why I wanted to mention that, Dan, is I know what they were really referring to is meeting, getting to know, and working with somebody who had a significant disability. Because unless they had a close relative with a disability, many never had the opportunity to come in contact with someone on a daily basis who had a disability. And they found that it helped inspire and motivate them to do a better job and to feel better about themselves and what has taken place around them. If there's a message that I want to give to your audience, it's to recognize how beneficial DEI and inclusion and diversity, equity offers everybody.
Well, thank you for mentioning that. That is important because that is a big buzz topic right now that's going on. And it does have a lot of negative connotation to it these days. But I think people are, in their minds, are thinking about something different. Maybe I'm wrong. But as you said, it impacts a lot of people with disabilities and such as yourself, that has given to the system. You've done amazing work as an attorney.
Dan, I might add that I appreciate what you're saying. But what I'm actually most proud of is not just my educational background or my work experience, but it's my personal life as well. And that includes all the help, love, and support I received from my very special family and my friends. But what I'd like to share with your listeners is that, people with disabilities are no different than anybody else. We still have the same needs, wants, and desires as everybody that they come in contact with. And for me, I'm very proud to say that 22 years ago, I married the woman of my dreams. Her name is Anna. She's the most special person I've ever met in my entire life. She's actually sitting next to me to my right. She's the one who just gave me the drink. And when I married Anna, she indicated that she wanted to have my baby, and not just a baby, my baby. And Dan, this really seemed impossible at the time. Back then, I had been paralyzed for more than 30 years, and I was already in my 50s. But we researched various options, including in vitro fertilization, and we're very excited to learn that it still might be possible for someone in my condition to father a child. So we pursued it, and through advancements in medical technology and science, Anna became pregnant. And Dan, on January 24th, 2005, I was present in the delivery room when my wife, Anna, gave birth to triplets. We have 3 incredible sons, Joey, Jimmy, and Timmy, and I could not be more proud. The 3 of them are now 20 years old. They've all completed their sophomore years in 3 separate colleges, doing absolutely great.
Wow, that's so amazing. When you said, like, you've done so many things that a lot of people probably think like were impossible in life.
That's why inclusion is so important. You know, when you include people with disabilities or other types of differences, people get amazed at how much we can contribute to society, want to be involved with everyone, and that there's a big, large place for everybody in this world, in this country, in this community, to include people that may be very different than you, but can help so many people in so many different ways. It makes everybody better by doing that.
So what lessons from your life do you want your sons to carry forward?
One is to appreciate what they have, never take it for granted, but also appreciate everybody else that's around them. And when people need help, offer it whenever you can. I know when I had the opportunity to help others, it made me feel so much better about myself. And I was so thankful that I had the opportunity to help others. Well, I know my children feel the same way now. And when they're able to, they try and help others in different ways. And I'm so proud to see.
So can you maybe share with the audience, like, how did you and your wife navigate the challenges of parenting where sometimes, you'll have a physical disability?
Well, it's been a challenge, but my wife is incredible. Initially, when my wife gave birth, we had a nanny initially to help out. But my wife continued taking care of me as well as our triplets. And there were times when we didn't have a nanny where we would, sit around the dinner table. And the way we would eat was my wife would give my son Joey a bite of food, then my son Jimmy a bite of food, then my son Timmy a bite of food, then me a bite of food. Then she would take a bite of food and go around the table again. And it was quite a challenge. It was quite a challenge when we'd go out anywhere. And sometimes I would have 2 or 3 boys on my lap on the wheelchair as I'm wheeling around with my wife beside me. But we managed, and it's worked out great. And there are times I'd go for a walk with my boys just on their own when, without my wife, when she was busy doing other errands. And my boys turned out to be very helpful to me. When I needed assistance, they learned how to do that. But in addition, I was able to guide them and teach them things and try and help build them so that they would have the proper character. And it's made such a difference in my life as well as their lives.
Was there any particular moment you had, like a proud dad moment in your life that still brings a smile to your face?
Unfortunately, I still have a lot of problems with blood pressure issues. I get dizzy a lot from low blood pressure. And there was a time where I went out alone with just my son, Joey, who was maybe 4 or 5 at the time, maybe a little older, maybe 6, 7, or 8. And we went to a store alone. I wheeled on my wheelchair and he walked beside me. And while we were in the store, I became very dizzy. And, I needed Joey to give me a blood pressure pill that I had in my pocket, and even to lift up my legs to hold them up because that would help my dizziness. to get my legs more on the level of my head. Now, we were in a crowded store at the time, and my son was, again, maybe 7 or 8 at the time. He didn't panic, even though a crowd was gathering. He didn't even ask anybody for help. He knew exactly what to do, didn't panic, gave me the pill, lifted up my legs, and just stood there helping me for as long as I needed it. And I couldn't have been more proud of him. Those type of incidents have happened quite a bit with all my children. And I know when I'm out without my wife, but I'm with my kids, I know I can totally rely on them to help me in any way that I can. And my wife, when they were younger, knew that she could leave me with the boys, and I would guide them and help them with their needs when they had either a question, whether it be in school or what to do, or, what to eat, or, how to stay safe. And it's just been great to be a father with triplet sons, an incredible wife. We now own a beautiful home with a big backyard, and I'm very happy. I know a lot of people are surprised that you could be a quadriplegic, be almost totally paralyzed, and lead a productive, useful, and happy life. And I'm here to say, not only could it be done, I am doing it.
But I wanted to ask you to go back to that book you mentioned that we can see it behind you. I dream of things that never were. What do you hope that readers will gain after reading your book?
One, I hope it'll help inspire and encourage them to be able to face challenges, overcome adversity, no matter what it is. I mean, we all face challenges in our lives. And I think it's helpful to know other people have faced challenges, whether they be similar or dissimilar, and they could overcome it. Now, when I was injured, I didn't know of any other role models that I could turn to and look to for inspiration. I mean, they may have been out there, but I just didn't know about them. I was injured about 25 years before Christopher Reeve's spinal cord injury. He was a tremendous role model, and I think he helped a lot of people showing what he could do. But I didn't have that at that time. In fact, when I was in the rehab facility, most of the roommates that I had in the rehab facility or other people I saw at the rehab facility didn't seem to be doing a lot with their lives. And I think that's because at that time, the medical personnel were not encouraging them to do more. And I think when people hear that there are a lot of things you can still do, no matter what problems you're facing, no matter what physical or intellectual condition you're in, there's still a lot you could do. So I've been told that when people have read my book or listened to it, it's now on audiobook as well, that it's helped inspire and motivate them to do more with their lives. And I'm so glad to hear that. That's the takeaway people get from hearing my story.
What changes would you like to see in how society supports, people with disabilities today?
It's still an issue of people with disabilities finding adequate employment. I'm proud to say that I'm still involved with the Viscardi Center. I serve on their board of directors. And I know that we still actively work to help people with disabilities secure employment. And, while facilities have been made more accessible, while transportation has been made more accessible, it's still attitudinal barriers that we need to work on, as well as problems with benefits. Sometimes people require an attendant care, and they may jeopardize their attendant coverage if they work and earn a living, and all of those obstacles need to be worked on and made less of an obstacle to help people be able to secure employment. And when I say employment, I mean employment with equal pay and with the equal opportunity for advancement. I think when employers see there's so much someone with a disability can do, they'll find that people with disabilities are some of the hardest working, most productive, most loyal employees an employer can ever hope to find. So I'm hoping to send that message to others and continue that fight.
So now that you've had all these accomplishments, how do you define success today?
One of the ways I define it is I could look at my wife, I could look at my children, I could look in the mirror and feel like I've done everything that I could possibly do to not only make my life better, but to help make the lives of others better as well. And to me, when you can do, that's a successful life.
Can you ever share with us and with people in the audience, and some people in the audience may also have a disability? Like, how do you handle moments of self-doubt, or you sometimes there may be like a moment of discouragement? How do you deal with that to turn that around?
We all have periods of self-doubt. We all have periods where we get depressed. That's going to happen no matter what condition you're in. And we all have to deal with that in our own ways. I know for me, all I need to do is look at my wife and children, and I instantly feel a lot better. But I know there are times we're just sitting out and observing the wonders of nature and being able to just relax, think about my thoughts, think about how wonderful the people around me have been, what an incredible family and friends I have, and how much their work and trying to help me feel better and do better in my life. It gives me encouragement that I want to do better myself. And I don't want to disappoint them with all the help people have given me. I want to show them I appreciate, and I'm doing as much as I can with my life. And I want to help my kids know that while we all have periods of depression, we can all rise above it and lead a happy and successful life.
Looking back at your life, because you're a little bit older now than you used to be, what are some of the things like you've been the most proud of, like looking back at your life?
Certainly what I'm most proud of is my family and how well they've turned out. But, I want to be able to know that I've given back to others, that I've made other lives better. And, I want to encourage people when they saw that I could go back to school and succeed, to encourage other individuals to go back to school and make the most of their intellectual abilities or technical abilities if they're learning a skill. When people have seen that I've worked and done well at my job, I want them to know that not just people with disabilities, but everybody has a lot they can offer if they're given the chance. I'm proud to say I was able to supervise a lot of student interns during my job. And I've taken a lot of pleasure in seeing that they've gone on and been very successful in their careers. And I think there's so much everybody can learn about just sitting back, appreciating what's taking place around them and doing more with their own lives to help others be able to accomplish things that they want to accomplish.
If you had a way to tell your 20-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
There would be a number of things, but one was to appreciate your family and friends and everybody else that you come in contact with, and do whatever you can to help others lead a successful and happy life, because that will bring you more happiness than anything you could possibly bring on your own. Now, as my 20-year-old self, I thought I was invincible. And I think it's important that people realize no one is invincible, and you need to be careful with your choices and what you decide to do. But there's an awful lot you can do to make not only your life better, but the lives of those around you better as well.
What's next for Ken Kunken? Any upcoming projects, goals, or dreams you're still chasing?
Actually, we recently came back, my wife and I and kids, took a trip to Montana. We drove back and forth to Montana for one of my nephew's weddings. So that was a great adventure. And we were away for a little over 3 weeks, and that was incredible. But I'm still active on the Viscardi Center, on their board of directors, involved in the Suffolk County Rehabilitation Society. I'm on the Cornell University Council. I look forward to helping my boys as they're going into their junior year in college, be the best that they can be. I tried studying on my own to learn a little bit more Polish because my wife is from Poland, and I want to be able to communicate better with all of her relatives. who speak Polish. I'm still trying to improve my language skills with respect to the Polish language. So there's a lot that I'm still involved in. But I might add that now that I'm fully retired, I've probably been as busy and as active as I've ever been.
Well, so if somebody had a question from our conversation today, or they're interested in getting in touch with you, what's the best way they can reach out to you?
They can go on my website, which is kenkunken.com, and that'll tell them the best way to reach me.
Great. It's been a real pleasure having you on the show. I wish you had more time, but we're kind of running out of time. Do you have any final words you'd like to share with the audience before we end our conversation for today?
One, Dan, I appreciate the opportunity to share my story. And I'd like to say I'm not the only one out there who has had a story that could possibly inspire and motivate others to do something more with their life than they thought they could do. Before I did some of the things that I didn't know of other people who were doing that. But there may have been others out there that were doing it. I just didn't know about it. That applies to everybody. When they think they're facing a challenge that nobody's faced before, they need to realize there are probably a lot of people who have faced similar challenges and that there are a lot of ways to overcome them. Never to lose hope. Tomorrow is always another day, and there's an awful lot everybody can do, no matter what challenges they face.
Ken, thank you so much for coming on the show. I created this podcast called Inspiring Impact, specifically to have a platform for people like yourself that could be so inspirational to other people. I'm sure you probably have, a huge impact in so many people's lives, probably thousands of people by now, and you continue to do so. Thank you so much for everything that you do. And thank you so much for choosing to be on my podcast. It's really much.
Thank you, Dan. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.